Welcome everyone to the penultimate episode of Wrestling with RahXephon. Now, after the Ayato video, I was originally going to go right into the conclusion of this retrospective. However, seeing as that I usually comment on some themes of a series that I'm reviewing, I thought I would dedicate an episode to RahXephon's failed themes. Now, I did dedicate an episode to why the motivations in this series don't make sense, and I talked about the theme of duty in the intro video, and in the Evangelion vs. RahXephon video, I also talked about how RahXephon kind of promotes, either intentionally or otherwise, bad mental hygiene. Now, none of those things are going to be the point of this video, and this is instead going to be a brief overview of a few things that I noticed popped in and out throughout the series, but weren't done particularly well, or strong enough to really warrant their own video. Getting into the biggest one, it seems like the most commonly cited theme for RahXephon, or at least one of the biggest ones, is eternal love. The idea that love conquers all, and that a strong bond can overcome any adversity present, and that's a great theme. I'm not going to harp on that because, people can be really inspired by other people, and a strong bond can help you get through a lot. However, said bond, or said examples of good bonds like that, are not really prevalent in RahXephon. The idea of love conquering all is sound in theory, however the execution here is horribly botched, as our main example is that of Haruka and Ayato. Ayato was an amnesiac with no real memory of anything that happened before he left Tokyo Jupiter, and Haruka is a girl who has obsessed over this guy and borderline stalked him for 12 years, even though that his relationship with her was only as deep as a middle school crush beforehand. So we have a guy who doesn't know the lady and doesn't understand a lot of the context because he literally doesn't remember it. And we have a lady who takes said minuscule context and conflates it to the point where her entire life is focused on getting back with this guy whom she made out with like 2 times in the back of a middle school playground. As you can see, I don't think that's a healthy relationship, especially because how it's kind of, quote, reconciled as the series progresses. I mean, they do have a few, like, quote, normal, awkward bonding moments, I guess. But then you also gotta consider that she literally kidnaps this guy, and then she lies to him about his true status as a Mu, even though, like, if you love this person, maybe you would go beyond work parameters and share some things you're not supposed to. I don't know, maybe you care more than that? I guess not. And she also gaslights him relentlessly. Again, there's arguments saying that, oh, Haruka just is misguided or whatever, but I don't care about that. Because, again, this isn't like they were married for 20 years and got separated and he forgot, and there's like some kind of strong foundation to build off of. No, this is some lady obsessing over a middle school crush from like 12 years ago and never getting over something which, quite frankly, she should have. And as such, it's a pretty toxic relationship in my eyes, and one which is not the pinnacle of romantic affection and should not be held up as proof of eternal love. Because really what it is eternal stalking, or eternal living in the past, or eternal inability or unwillingness to get over hiccups in life. It's not a good relationship. And to be fair, there's not many good relationships in the show. Ironically, for a show that's supposed to be about eternal love, almost every relationship in the show is broken or sad or toxic. Itsuki has a really weird, unhealthy connection with his lab assistant, who obsesses over him even though he's not really interested. And then he awkwardly pursues Haruka as well. Again, a very awkward and uncomfortable arrangement. Makoto exploits women. He doesn't care about them. He'll just use any physical or emotional connection to get what he wants. That's extremely toxic. Kunigi's divorced. His wife leaves him because he's a workaholic, and the two cannot reconcile the past together to the point where they can get back together. Lord Bobbin is some creepy weirdo who I've assumed has lived by himself for like 10,000 years. We see the connection between LV and Mr. Wong, which is tragically broken upon his death, only after it's been formed for like 40 minutes or so. Maya left her husband, Dr. Watari, for really no apparent reason, it seems. Quan seems to have some weird, bizarre, incestuous interest in Ayato. Toragai is controlling and abusive towards Asahina, who he is supposedly dating. Uncle Ricto's unmarried. Like, there is almost no healthy or positive romantic relationships in the entire series. The only one that I can think of is Kim and Yagamo's, which does do an excellent job establishing a healthy relationship, and even proves that damaged people or people with trauma can move past that in order to establish a healthy relationship, as we see with Kim's character evolution. This relationship, though, is unfortunately buried throughout most of the series and isn't that prevalent, instead being passed up by some of the more toxic ones like Ayato Haruka and so on and so forth. Another disappointment of the series is the power of music. Now, RahXephon seems to be, at least on the surface, a very musical series. The OST is excellent, I'm not going to deny that, and there is a lot of musical terms thrown around. Things like timbre, which is pronounced timber in the series because whoever was doing the voice acting wasn't aware of how to pronounce it, or retune, and so on and so forth. However, while music is held to have a mystical and supernatural powers in the series, we the viewers never really see this, and it's incredibly and criminally underbaked throughout the entirety of the series. Now, there are a few scenes where the physical power of music is shown, i.e. the giant tuning fork can have a sonic wave attack, or Itsuki goes so far as to show us some flowers which grow sad because Quan played a sad song for like 5 hours straight. I appreciate those things. However, those only scratch the surface of the real power of music because they just show some physical cause and effect. They don't actually touch on the real power of music, the emotional and the spiritual power of music that can enable people to reach into higher planes and feel such strong emotions because of how their minds are stimulated and engaged through such sweet tones. Music has the power to move us by moving how we feel and our views on the world, and can move people to do incredible things or make them incredibly more efficient at something, so on and so forth. It can literally change how you feel, and it can literally change your view in the world and your mental and spiritual state of being. And yet RahXephon does almost nothing about this. I was always expecting an episode where the cast is exposed to a really sad song and it makes them depressed and they have to overcome it. It's a sort of one-off episode where the power of music takes the forefront. Or maybe there would be an episode where everyone's really angry because Quan's learning a new piece and it's a very angry piece. Or something like this where the real emotional power of music would be commented on, but it never really is, and instead it's always just this kind of ancillary part of the series that, while they say it's important, is never treated that important. Even the Mu's arias are very uninteresting. You hear the idea of some divine, otherworldly music. You expect something with a lot of tones, or complexity, or something really, really weird. But the arias in the series are just kind of, they're choral warm-up pieces. At least that's what they sound like to me. Where, they are a little unsettling, because I'm sure they're in some odd chord or dissonant key, but it's not to the point where it makes me uncomfortable, and it's so weird that it stands out like actual alien music, where it sounds like actual music aliens might make just because they're so different and hear on different frequencies or something. And at the same time, they're not appealing to me as a human enough in terms of like human emotion or human music. They're just kind of boring. Music doesn't necessarily have to be super complex or fast to be interesting, but there has to be something about it that grabs your attention and elicits some kind of emotion. And the arias don't do that because, again, they just sound like choral warm-up exercises moved down a few tones and put in a few slightly weird keys and chords. Music is, according to RahXephon, super powerful and has the power to retune the world, yet it doesn't even show power to elicit many emotions throughout the series, so it kind of falls flat on its face here. And it's extremely and criminally undercooked. I wanted so much more out of that in this series. Another undercooked aspect of the series is the usage of Mesoamerican lore and iconography and terminology. Now, I commented it earlier that I love RahXephon taking inspiration from Mesoamerican lore and mythology because that's not a frequent source for anime to cite from. Usually it'll be Japanese mythology and some European stuff. Maybe they'll get into little Buddhism outside of Japan, maybe like Tibetan or Buddhism, but Latin America is not a common source of inspiration for anime, so I saw a lot of cool and unique directions they could have taken this in, especially considering how different Mesoamerican pre-Columbian cultures were compared to the stuff that anime usually draws inspiration from. They could have commented more on the cyclical nature of the world. They could have done more world building with the Mu, and we could have seen these beautiful Mesoamerican temples or cities. Perhaps they borrow certain religious things from the Mesoamerican sources other than the idea of a cyclical universe. But instead, they just kind of take a few notes out of the Mesoamerican aesthetic book and kind of take the idea of a cyclical world and a sun cycle. That's about all they really do with it. Now, this isn't a central theme of the series, it's more of an aesthetic thing. However, again, it is very underutilized, and I was hoping for a lot more out of it, especially considering they used Nahuatl terms throughout the series. But lack of world building on the part of the Mu really kind of torpedoes this. Finally, one last thing I wanted to comment on isn't a theme really in the series, but it's a weird thing I noticed, and that is RahXephon doesn't necessarily seem to know whether it believes in the power of fate or individual agency. Now, most shows will usually take a firm stance on this. They'll say, fate conquers all, fate is the decider of everything, humans are powerless in an uncaring universe, no matter what you do, the end result's going to be the same. Boom, 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 boom. Here's how you tried to do something different, and ironically, you got the same result. Usually, this kind of format is used in tragic stories or stories with a cautious moral to try and dissuade people from bad ideas. Stuff like the self-fulfilling prophecy or tragic tale of fate screwing over someone in spite of multiple efforts to avoid that fate, proving that fate is tragic and cannot be overcome. Or struggling in the face of an uncaring universe, stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with that point of view. I personally don't agree with it, but it is one side of the spectrum of the fate versus agency argument. On the other side, you have free will, the idea that doesn't matter what's supposed to happen because what's supposed to happen is unknown. Really, the only thing that's going to happen is what you make happen or what the actions of those around you make happen. It's the idea that we all have agency and, in some ways, minor and major, can shape our lives and the world around us. It's a very positive messaging championing the idea that, yes, while people can screw other people over, they can also work together to make their own lives better for both themselves and those around them. Now, I personally prescribe to this idea, and if you've watched any of my videos on other series, you will know I'm a big fan of individual agency. However, a series can be good while taking either side. You can agree with either one, or you can disagree with both, or take your own opinion, but the point is that they're consistent. And RahXephon is not consistent, and I consider this the most grievous thematic flaw of the series, because it kind of undermines a lot of the series and taps into the motivational issues we've commented on in other videos. You see, a lot of Ayato's character and arc, and kind of just generic anime arc, is the main character learning how to experience and control his powers, and then using them to make his own fate and protect those around him, and just affect the world for the better, of using his own agency to both enhance it further and to enhance the world for himself and those around him, to make the world a better place by taking action and doing the right thing. And that's a lot of Ayato's character arc for like the first 21 episodes. He does have a lot of struggles, but he does go out of his way to try and do his best and establish himself. And he even does so in episode 22, where he gives a speech and basically tells Mishimi to F off. However, in the last 4 episodes, everyone tells Ayato, you gotta retune the world no matter what. It's fate. You can't avoid fate. You gotta do this. You gotta retune the world no matter what. You gotta do it. And instead of him rebutting this and saying, well, if I have the power of the RahXephon as a god, you know, I can make whatever world I want. I have agency. I've just established this. But he doesn't. He just says, well, I guess it's fate. I guess I'll do it. I guess I have to do this thing people tell me to, even though I'm a literal god right now and can probably defy all of these people. It sets up a really weird dichotomy where one of the main characters does a lot of establishing his own agency and is very good at doing so and makes a very compelling case for free agency. And then on the other side, the show kind of just tosses that out the window and says, nope, it's all fate-based. You got to do it because fate. I don't care about your agency. F off. You got to play by the rules here. And it really bothers me because the show doesn't seem to stick to either argument. It could stick to either one, and as long as it would be consistent, I would be fine with it. But it's inconsistent to the point where I can't tell if RahXephon is telling me that fate is inescapable, or if it's saying that we do have agency and we need to embrace it. And since it can't seem to decide on which one it wants to choose, it makes both messages muddled and ineffective to me. I really hate how Ayato finally establishes himself as his own guy, and then literally like 20 minutes later just says, okay, I'll do whatever you say, Lord Bob. And like, no, it's really dumb, and it undoes a lot of his writing, and it makes this message here so muddled because is it proving that agency isn't real because he goes with fate? Or is it proving agency is real because he decides to make that fate for himself and it just happens to be what the series wanted? It just feels really contrived, and I really don't like it, as you can probably tell by now, and I wish the series just chose a side and stuck with it, instead of kind of getting wishy-washy about it near the end, making it unable to fully promote or embrace either side of this argument. I can't even say if the theme of RahXephon is to use agency or that fate is inescapable, because it's so muddled. And I think that is a big thematic issue of the series, and one which I really don't like. If they stuck with the idea of free agency, then yeah, it would have been a great anime story, because Ayato would have made his own fate and done his own thing, and yeah, we're great. Or they could have gone with the idea that fate is unescapable, and Ayato is unable to defy his fate, and thus a tragic ending occurs. Now, while this would have resulted in a less positive ending, it would have at least been something kind of consistent with the ideas present here, and one I could have respected. Not all stories are meant to be happy, and as long as they impart a good message to us, or relate some kind of tale or something, then they are worthy of being told. Either way would have been fine. We could have had a great anime story where Ayato establishes his own agency and we go, yay, the guy overcame the odds. Or it could have been a tragic tale where he fails to do this, and we are left to lament the tragedy of Ayato Kamino. But that doesn't happen, and RahXephon can't really pick a side, so instead, this is just another addition to the lamentation for RahXephon's failed and bungled thematic elements.